Hi YouTube, welcome back. Today I want to talk to you about tomato trellising. There are many different ways to trellis your tomato. There's no one right or wrong way to do it. Everybody's different, everyone's climate is different, and there are different things that'll work better for different people and also for different tomato plants. Now, I generally grow indeterminate varieties, so they just keep growing. They get very tall. And they generally last until fall here. I'll have a few tomato plants that will die off early, but generally the blight doesn't take them out like it can farther down south. So I will usually still have most of my tomato plants when the frost comes. They may not be producing very much by then, but they're usually still alive. Now, there are also determinate tomatoes, which only get to a certain height, which is different for every variety. And they will usually put most of their fruit on at one time, and then they're done. I have grown some determinants. I don't like them as much. I have no plans to grow any determinants this year. Doesn't mean I won't add any late at the last minute because, tomatoes. But I'm just going to stick with the indeterminates this year in my plan. This bed will actually hold 32 tomato plants in 2 rows, and I'm trying it a little bit different this year. Zoom, zoom. I have 2 fences put up, and there is about 14-16 inches between the 2 fences. That way there will be airflow in between the 2 rows of tomatoes. Now last year I did the Florida weave, which did not go well at all. I'll link it up here though, if you want to see. Now, determinate tomatoes do not need as much support because they don't get as tall, generally speaking. Many of them are like 3 to 5 feet high. There's some smaller, some bigger. It all depends on your variety of tomato. The tomato cages that you buy in the store that are like 3 feet tall, yeah, they're good for peppers. They're not good for tomatoes. I've never grown a tomato that works in one of those type of tomato cages. But it all depends on what variety, how big it gets. My very first tomatoes that I grew, it said determinate on it, but it kept growing and it kept putting fruit on, and yeah, it was very unmanageable. But since I'm just growing indeterminates, that's what this video is about: how to trellis indeterminate varieties. Now, if you're going to single stem your tomatoes, which means you take off all the suckers and just leave one main stem, for one thing, you can put them a lot closer. You won't get as many tomatoes, but it's easier to trellis them, and you can put them closer and you can have more plants. That's what I do. I can actually get away with planting them 18 inches apart as long as I keep them single stemmed. Because we don't get super humid here. We get a good bit of rain, but not drenched rain. Yeah. It works here. It may not work in your area, but it works here. Now, if you don't want to single stem your tomatoes, you will have to build a cage for them, basically. Now, you can take this same type of fencing here and build a very tall, very round cage to put around it. I've seen it done. I've never used it myself because I do always single stem my tomatoes. But that is an option if you don't want to trim all the suckers off. I have in the past used mostly just a single stake. I like to get furring strips, like little 2x2 pieces of board, 8 feet long, and my tomatoes will generally get taller than that. But you just tie it to the stake as it grows. There are many different things that you can use to tie it to a stake. But you just want to make sure that you use something that won't cut into the stem as it grows. So you don't want to use like a super strong thin twine and have it tight. You need to leave it room to grow, because the stem will get thicker as it grows. I have also in the past used a method called the Florida weave. I've done it twice. Last year did not go so well, because one of the big downfalls of the Florida weave is you have to keep up with it. I had some back issues in the middle of summer, and I got behind, and then I never could get it caught up, because there's just too many tomatoes, and I could never get everything caught up. So this year I decided for something a little different. I have seen it done before, but I've never done it this way. This is just rolled fencing, and this is the large holes. It's like 4 inches, 4x4 square in the holes, and I'm just going to clip it or tie it to the fencing as it grows. Unfortunately, it's not all that tall, because the fencing itself is only 4 feet tall. I have about 18 to 24 inches below the fencing from the ground, and then, you know, it will keep growing taller, but that only works to a small degree, and then it'll fall over. So I plan on either topping them or trying to grow them sideways, depending on how full everything is by that point. So I'm hoping that the fencing will make it a little bit easier, even if I do have some issues and I get behind. I'm hoping it'll make it easier to catch them back up and not be as stressful on my back too. Doing the Florida weave, until you get the levels up, it is hard on your back, bending over and trying to run the line. Single staking, I didn't want to put 32 stakes in this bed, and the wood rots, and then you'd have to buy more. And so I'm hoping this will last longer, because it's metal stakes and the metal fencing. I'm hoping to get several years out of it, and hoping that it'll be easier and help keep the airflow in the middle because of the 2 rows. So we'll see how that goes. I did have last year on my pea trellis, which is another fence just like this, actually cut from the same roll. I had a volunteer tomato that was growing in front of it that I didn't even see until after I pulled the potatoes out, and it had been just growing along the ground underneath the potatoes, and it was a good 2.5 feet long when I found it. So I just clipped it up to the fence and, yeah, figured see what happens. And we actually did get some. It was a cherry tomato. We did get some tomatoes off of it before frost came. But that's when I really had the idea to, hey, let's try fencing over here for this year, because, yeah, I already knew the Florida weave wasn't working at that point. But the single staking is not bad. You just end up with a lot of ugly looking stakes, really. It's not very pretty when you have that many in a bed. I'm hoping this will be a little bit prettier. We'll see how that goes. But there are also other options that you can use. You know, if you have a fence, especially if it's like a wire fence, you can easily grow your tomatoes up against that. You can build all kinds of stuff. I've seen people use pallets and like build things out of pallets. You know, I'm all about using the resources that you have. I had bought this fencing for the pea trellis last year, and I didn't use the whole roll. I actually had a whole lot more than I thought I did. I bought a bigger roll than I thought. So I used the same roll that I already had to put these up. I did buy new stakes though, because I didn't want to try and put this fencing up on 2x2s that I had out here. I've also seen people do like a wire system that's kind of like what a lot of people use for raspberries and grapes, things like that. Whereas you get some like 4x4 stakes on the end, or 4x4 posts on the ends, and you run like wires along it. I've seen some very interesting setups with that, and sometimes they'll actually have like a frame going around the top with hooks, and they'll have the tomatoes going up a string to the hook, and then they can actually, as the tomato grows taller than the space you have, move the hook sideways so that they're growing at diagonals. I've seen some very interesting things. So I encourage you to be creative. Use what you have, or what's, you know, widely available in your area. I know there's a lot of things that are in shortages right now. You know, don't think that you have to have something store-bought to be able to put your tomatoes up. Use what you have. Keep in mind that your tomato plant is going to get pretty heavy, so you want to try and make it as sturdy as you can. But use the things that you have around you, the supplies that you can find, or stuff that you have around the house. Whatever it is that you have available, use it. Get creative. Think outside of the box. I'm hoping this setup works for me. I know it won't work for everybody. This setup will especially work more for like rows of tomatoes. If you just have like a couple tomato plants in a bed or something like that, you'd probably be better off with just a couple stakes. Different things will work better for different setups, and a lot of it will depend on your garden layout, the type of tomatoes that you're growing, a lot of things. So get creative. These are just a couple ideas. I'm sure there's plenty more out there that I've never even heard of. So I hope this has helped you, or at least entertained you. Thanks for coming along with me today. May the Father bless you. Shalom.